There is a place where the shadows stretch longer, where the air feels heavier, and the past seems unwilling to let go. It's a place where nature thrives in quiet defiance, but the trees and the soil remember what happened here. This is the Hürtgen Forest, a name etched into the annals of history, not for victory or triumph, but for unimaginable suffering. During the final stages of World War II, this dense woodland became a battleground unlike any other. Tens of thousands of soldiers, American and German, were drawn into its labyrinth of trees, where every step could be their last. But the Hürtgen is not just a place of war stories, it is a place where echoes of the past refuse to fade. Decades after the fighting ceased, whispers of something unexplainable began to emerge. Soldiers spoke of it first, visions of comrades long gone, voices calling out from nowhere. Over time, hikers, hunters, and explorers brought back stories of their own, tales that would send chills down their spines. Tonight, we step into the Hürtgen Forest to uncover its truth, a truth buried beneath its roots, entwined with its history, and shrouded in mysteries that endure to this day. This is more than a story about war. It is a story about the enduring weight of loss and the echoes left behind in places where death came suddenly and in overwhelming numbers. The Hürtgen Forest campaign began in September 1944, as Allied forces sought to break through German lines. But what should have been a straightforward push toward victory turned into one of the longest and most devastating battles of the war. The forest itself became the ultimate weapon, a natural maze where visibility was scarce, traps were everywhere, and death waited in silence. Some called it a slaughterhouse, a battlefield where progress was measured in inches. Others saw it as a tomb, an open grave for soldiers caught between their orders and the unforgiving terrain. For those who survived, the memories of this forest would haunt them long after the war ended. But for some, peace never came. Even now, as the forest heals, there are those who say it remains a place where the past refuses to stay buried. Whispers tell of footsteps heard in empty woods, shadows moving in the fog, and voices calling out for help, though no one is there to answer. The Hürtgen Forest holds its secrets tightly, but those who have dared to step into its depths tell of experiences that defy explanation. Tonight, we will walk through the fog of history and memory, searching for answers in the ghostly echoes of the fallen. September 1944. The Allied forces had achieved critical victories in France and were pushing toward the German border. The end of the war seemed closer than ever. But along the German-Belgian frontier, a stretch of dense, impenetrable forest stood between the Allies and the Rhine River, Germany's final line of defense. This was the Hürtgen Forest. Covering nearly 50 square miles of rugged terrain, the forest was a natural fortress, with towering trees and steep, uneven ground. Its thick canopy allowed little light to penetrate, creating an environment where even the most seasoned soldiers found themselves disoriented. For the Allies, the Hürtgen was a gateway to the Rhine. If they could break through, they could cut off German supply lines and secure a path to Berlin. But for the Germans, it was an opportunity to stall the Allied advance and regroup for a counteroffensive. Both sides knew this battle would be pivotal, but neither could have anticipated the horrors that awaited. The Hürtgen Forest was unlike any battlefield the Allies had encountered. The towering trees, dense undergrowth, and uneven terrain turned the forest into a natural labyrinth. Every step forward was met with resistance, not just from the enemy but from the forest itself. Rain turned the ground to mud, making it nearly impossible for vehicles to pass. Heavy fog rolled in without warning, reducing visibility to mere feet. Mines were hidden under the leaves, and tripwires snaked through the trees. Soldiers were not only fighting the enemy, they were fighting the forest. For months, the battle raged. Artillery fire shattered the silence, splintering trees and sending shrapnel flying in every direction. The Germans, entrenched in fortified bunkers, had the upper hand. They knew the terrain, and their defenses were almost impossible to penetrate. For the soldiers, the forest was a living nightmare. The constant barrage of artillery, the freezing nights, and the ever-present fear of ambush took a heavy toll. Many soldiers were cut off from their units, wandering the forest alone, with no sense of direction and no hope of rescue. By the end of the battle, the numbers were staggering. Over 33,000 American soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured. The German losses were equally devastating. For every inch of ground gained, hundreds of lives were lost. The forest had become a graveyard, a place where life seemed to stand still, frozen in the moment of its greatest suffering. When the battle finally ended in February 1945, The Hürtgen Forest was left scarred and broken. The once vibrant trees stood as blackened stumps, their roots tangled with the remains of the fallen. Entire villages surrounding the forest were wiped off the map, leaving nothing but ruins as a reminder of what had been. For years after the war, the forest remained a dangerous place. Unexploded mines and artillery shells lay hidden beneath the soil, claiming the lives of unsuspecting farmers and villagers. Even today, remnants of the battle can be found scattered across the forest, a rusted helmet here, a fragment of a rifle there. But the devastation wasn't just physical. For those who survived, the Hürtgen Forest was a place they could never truly leave behind. The memories of comrades lost, the fear and exhaustion, and the overwhelming sense of helplessness stayed with them for the rest of their lives. And yet, even as the forest regrew, as time marched on, the Hürtgen remained a place where history lingered. Stories of strange happenings began to emerge, whispers in the trees, shadows that seemed to move on their own. Some say the forest never forgot what happened here. Some say it never let go. Even as the final shots of the Hürtgen campaign faded, the forest refused to grow quiet. Soldiers who survived the blood-soaked battlefield spoke in hushed tones about things they'd witnessed, things that didn't belong to the natural order. While the world outside celebrated the end of war, those who had set foot in the Hürtgen Forest carried with them memories that didn't align with the ordinary horrors of combat. It began during the battle itself. At night, when the fighting slowed and an uneasy silence blanketed the woods, soldiers would hear strange sounds, sounds they couldn't explain. Some reported hearing gunfire far in the distance, but when they scouted the area, there were no signs of conflict. Others claimed they heard screams, anguished cries for help, echoing through the trees. But when they tried to follow the sounds, they found no one. And then, there were the figures. Some soldiers swore they saw shadowy shapes moving between the trees, just at the edge of their vision. These figures would disappear when approached, leaving behind nothing but the whisper of footsteps fading into the distance. Private William Harper, a machine gunner with the 9th Infantry Division, wrote in his journal about an experience that haunted him for the rest of his life. One foggy night, Harper and his unit heard what sounded like a man crying out in pain. It was faint at first, but it grew louder, closer, more desperate. Thinking it was one of their own, Harper and 2 others ventured into the dark to search. "We called out, but there was no answer," Harper wrote. "The voice kept moving, like it was leading us deeper into the forest. And then it stopped, just like that. Dead silence. We stood there for what felt like hours, but nothing came. When we turned to head back to camp, we realized we didn't know where we were. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed us whole." Harper and his companions eventually made it back, but they never found the source of the cries. To this day, his journal entry remains one of the earliest documented accounts of what some believe are the restless spirits of the Hürtgen Forest. Corporal James Adler had a different story. He described seeing a man in a German uniform standing motionless just beyond the tree line. At first, Adler thought he was imagining it, but when he alerted his comrades, they saw him too. The man stood perfectly still, his eyes locked on theirs, before vanishing into thin air. Adler searched the area, convinced it was an enemy soldier, but there were no footprints, no signs of movement. Nothing. Adler's account was not unique. Over the course of the battle, soldiers on both sides reported similar sightings, figures appearing and disappearing without a trace. Were they enemy scouts? Tricks of the mind? Or something else entirely? When the war ended and the soldiers left, the stories didn't stop. Civilians who ventured into the Hürtgen Forest began to experience strange phenomena of their own. Locals reported hearing whispers when no one else was around, the faint murmur of voices carried on the wind. Some claimed they could hear footsteps following them, though when they turned, the path behind them was empty. A hiker in the 1970s recalled an incident where he stumbled across a group of men in military uniforms. Thinking it was a reenactment, he approached to ask what was happening, but as he drew closer, the figures faded into the mist, leaving him alone in the clearing. Others have spoken of seeing ghostly figures standing among the trees, their faces obscured but their uniforms unmistakable, American and German soldiers, frozen in time. For those who have experienced these moments, the Hürtgen Forest is more than just a place, it is a reminder that some battles never truly end. What explains the ghostly phenomena of the Hürtgen Forest? Some historians and psychologists believe the stories may stem from the psychological scars left by the battle. Survivors of the war, many suffering from what we now recognize as PTSD, may have projected their trauma onto the forest itself, creating an atmosphere where even the smallest sound felt like a haunting. Others point to the concept of residual energy, the idea that places of immense trauma can hold onto the emotions and actions of the past. With tens of thousands of lives lost in the Hürtgen Forest, it's no surprise that many believe the land itself carries the weight of that history. Skeptics, of course, dismiss these claims as folklore, nothing more than the human tendency to find patterns and meaning in the unknowable. But for those who have experienced the unexplainable firsthand, no amount of logic or reasoning can erase what they saw, what they heard, and what they felt in the depths of the Hürtgen Forest. The Hürtgen Forest does not rest. Decades after the last bullet was fired, its dark reputation has grown, drawing in those who seek answers to the inexplicable. Paranormal investigators, relic hunters, and even skeptics have walked these paths, armed with technology, curiosity, and, often, an overwhelming sense of unease. But what they found defies reason. In a place where history is etched into every tree, where the soil itself seems steeped in tragedy, evidence of the unexplainable continues to emerge. Their stories are not just tales of the supernatural, they are confrontations with the lingering echoes of one of World War II's deadliest battlefields. In the decades following World War II, the Hürtgen Forest became a magnet for paranormal investigators. Armed with modern tools designed to measure the unseen, these teams sought to answer one question: are the stories of hauntings rooted in truth? Electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, quickly became one of the primary methods used to probe the mysteries of the forest. Investigators reported capturing chilling recordings, voices that seemed to come from nowhere. One such recording, made by a German investigative team in the 1990s, featured a voice calling out a name repeatedly: Johann. Johann. The investigators later discovered that Johann was a common name among German soldiers stationed in the region during the battle. Thermal cameras also revealed anomalies. In one instance, a team detected a heat signature resembling a human figure standing in the distance. When they approached the spot, the signature vanished, and the area was completely cold, no footprints, no signs of life. One investigator recounted an experience that left her shaken. While reviewing footage from a night in the forest, she heard a faint whisper on the tape: "Help me." The voice was soft, desperate, and undeniably human. But the forest had been empty, no one else was there. Some investigators have speculated that the forest is a time capsule of sorts, where the horrors of war replay endlessly. These theories are supported by findings that suggest residual hauntings, moments frozen in time, replaying for those sensitive enough to perceive them. The stories don't end with investigators. Locals who have lived near the forest their entire lives have their own chilling experiences to share. Many refuse to enter the forest after dark, claiming it has a way of making you feel. One villager, an elderly man who grew up near the Hürtgen Forest, described an incident from his childhood. He and a group of friends had ventured into the woods to play, only to hear the unmistakable sound of marching boots behind them. The sound grew louder, as if an entire regiment was advancing, yet no one appeared. Terrified, the boys ran back to the village and never returned to that part of the forest. Relic hunters, too, have shared unnerving tales. One such account came from a man who was searching for artifacts among the trees. He recalled feeling a hand on his shoulder, firm and unmistakable. But when he turned, there was no one there. His tools, which had been neatly arranged beside him, were suddenly scattered across the ground. Visitors from outside the region have also reported strange occurrences. Hikers have described hearing whispers that seemed to follow them, though they were completely alone. Some even claim to see shadowy figures standing among the trees, their outlines faint but unmistakable. Over the years, countless photographs and videos have emerged, each adding to the growing legend of the Hürtgen Forest. Some images capture glowing orbs of light, often dismissed as dust or moisture by skeptics. But others seem harder to explain: shadowy figures, partially obscured, yet undeniably human in shape, appearing in the background of photos taken deep within the forest. In one widely discussed case, a video showed what appeared to be a soldier in a World War II uniform walking through the trees. The figure moved naturally, as though patrolling, but when the cameraman called out, the figure disappeared. Attempts to recreate the footage under similar conditions failed to produce the same results, leaving the video's authenticity hotly debated. Skeptics point to tricks of light and shadow, or even hoaxes, as explanations for these anomalies. But for those who have captured these moments, there is little doubt, they believe they've glimpsed the restless spirits of those who perished in the forest's unrelenting grasp. In the heart of the Hürtgen Forest, the line between the past and the present blurs. The quiet, seemingly untouched woods hide more than just the remains of a brutal battle. Some say they carry the very souls of the soldiers who once fought and died here, their spirits forever bound to this place, unable to find peace. Over the years, stories have emerged, stories of soldiers who never left, of voices whispered on the wind, and of figures that materialize in the shadows. For those who venture into these woods, the question remains, are these just stories, passed down through generations? Or are they the chilling remnants of a past that refuses to fade away? One of the most enduring legends of the Hürtgen Forest is that of the Eternal Patrol. According to those who have heard the stories, a group of soldiers, lost in the chaos of battle, are said to still roam the forest, their spirits bound to this land for eternity. But they are not lost in the traditional sense. They do not wander aimlessly, hopelessly searching for an end. No, these soldiers have a mission. They are the guardians of their comrades' final resting places. It is said that they patrol the forest, ensuring that those who fought alongside them are never forgotten, protecting their graves from desecration. Many who have ventured into these woods late at night claim to have witnessed this patrol, moving silently through the fog, their figures barely visible in the shifting mist. Some have even heard their footsteps crunching softly on the forest floor, only to turn and find no one there. There are stories of hikers who, while walking alone on the trails, have felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over them. And yet, when they speak to others later, they realize they were not alone. There were always soldiers standing watch, in the shadows, unseen yet ever present. Among the many tales that swirl through the forest, none is more unsettling than the legend of the whispering trees. For generations, locals and visitors alike have spoken of hearing voices, faint and distant, carried on the wind as it rustles through the branches. These whispers are not the product of nature, they claim. No, they are the voices of soldiers, lost men, their lives cut short, whose spirits are said to have become part of the very forest itself. The most eerie accounts come from those who venture into the forest alone, hoping to find a moment of quiet or reflection, only to be disturbed by the sudden and unmistakable sound of their own name being whispered by the wind. Some have described hearing a voice, familiar, comforting, calling out to them, as if beckoning them closer. Yet, when they turn to see who is calling, there is no one there. For others, the whispers are not their own names, but the names of soldiers long dead, names that have long been forgotten, except by the forest. The whispers often come in the dead of night, when the world is still and the forest is shrouded in darkness. It is as if the trees themselves are trying to communicate with those who listen, offering fragments of lost conversations, pleas for help, and cries of anguish that have been trapped in the woods for decades. Every part of the Hürtgen Forest holds its own ghostly legend, every trail, every bunker, every ruin carries with it a story of those who perished here. The Call Trail, in particular, is one of the most famous sites of these haunting accounts. This is where soldiers fought in close quarters, where the ground was soaked with blood, and where the final moments of many were played out in terror. Many who walk the Call Trail report seeing figures moving among the trees, soldiers, dressed in the tattered uniforms of both the American and German armies, silently trudging through the underbrush. They never make a sound, but their presence is unmistakable, as if they are reliving their final moments over and over again, trapped in an endless loop. The old bunkers scattered throughout the forest are another site of unsettling stories. One famous account speaks of a group of relic hunters, searching for remnants of the past, who took shelter inside an abandoned bunker. As they settled in for the night, they began hearing footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving just outside the walls. Thinking it was another group of explorers, they opened the door, only to find the forest eerily silent, no one in sight. The footsteps, it seemed, were not from any living person. The Hürtgen Forest is more than just a place. It is a living testament to the men who fought, died, and disappeared in the shadows of its trees. The stories and legends of this haunted landscape will continue to persist, passed down from generation to generation, as long as the forest stands. For those who visit, it is a reminder that the past is never truly gone. It lingers, waiting to be heard, waiting to be remembered. And for some, it may never let go. The Hürtgen Forest stands as a monument, a memorial not made of stone or steel, but of the very land itself. Here, the echoes of war are carved into the earth, the trees, the soil, and the very air you breathe. The forest may appear peaceful now, a place where nature slowly heals the wounds left behind. But beneath the surface, beneath its calm beauty, there lies an undeniable truth. This is a place where men fought and died in unimaginable numbers. A place where lives were cut short in the blink of an eye, and where the brutality of war altered the course of history. Those who survived carried with them the invisible scars of the trauma, their memories forever intertwined with the land. The trees that stand here today, the very ground you walk upon, has absorbed the horrors of what transpired. And as much as nature strives to restore balance, there are things that simply cannot be forgotten. The war is over, but the traces it left behind, in the hearts and minds of those who lived through it, still remain. Though time has passed, the soldiers who fought here, who gave their lives here, will never be forgotten. They remain etched into the landscape, part of the forest story. It is only right that we pause and honor them, not just for their sacrifice, but for their humanity. The lives they led before the war, the families they left behind, the dreams they never saw fulfilled. Today, the Hürtgen Forest stands as a reminder of that sacrifice, a living memorial, where nature flourishes and grows, but where the past cannot be erased. We remember them not only as soldiers, but as people, as sons, fathers, and brothers, who faced the horrors of war with courage, and whose spirits, in some way, still remain with us. The mystery of the Hürtgen Forest, its hauntings, its lost soldiers, the echoes of voices in the wind, remains unsolved. But perhaps that is part of its power. In its stillness, the forest continues to speak, in whispers and shadows, to those willing to listen. To those who seek answers, who venture into these woods, the past is never truly gone. It lingers in the air, in the rustling leaves, in the whispers of the trees, in the very ground beneath your feet. The question we must ask ourselves is not whether these stories are real, but what they mean to us. Perhaps it is a reminder that war is never as distant as we like to think. That the price of peace is paid in ways we cannot always understand, and that the spirits of the past, of those who have fought, and suffered, and died, are always with us, in one form or another. We invite you to share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Have you heard the whispers of the forest? Do you have your own stories to tell? The truth of the Hürtgen Forest might never be fully known, but together, we can keep its memories alive.